Good morning, everybody. We're just going to start a couple of minutes early just to see if you have any technical issues or adjust your sound quality if you need to. So welcome today to today's webinar on GDPR. We're really glad that you can attend. And we just want to start off with just sending out a quick poll just to see who our audience is today. So I'm just going to launch it now. So it should appear on your screen now, the poll. Fantastic. Okay, perfect. Excuse me. So I just introduced myself. My name is Amelia Sutton and I work in marketing at Spain-Holiday.com. And I will be hosting the webinar for you today alongside my colleague Nicola Ehrlich, who is a straight-talking industry analyst and is regularly quoted in international media on topics related to Spanish tourism law. So just want to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. So the agenda for today's webinar is designed to bring you some clarity concerning GDPR and to give you some practical information on where you may need to take action in order to comply with the new legislation. So it's really important that we get across now that anything that you do hear in the presentation does not substitute as legal advice. We will happily answer any questions at the end of the presentation, but if there is a specific issue that you think relates to yourself or it's more complex, we do advise that you do go on to seek legal advice. So we're going to start with a 40-minute presentation that will be followed by a 20-minute question and answer session. So do feel free to send us your questions during the presentation and we'll try and get through as many as we can at the end of the presentation. To send us a question, if you're on a desktop or laptop, you should be able to see the question button and click on there. And if you're on a mobile app, it should be at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so that's the introduction. Now I'm going to hand you over to Nicola and she will start the presentation.
Thank you for that, Amelia, and hello everybody from sunny Spain. I'm here in Malaga. We're going to get started in a minute. I can still see people are just joining the webinar, so before we get into the full details, we'll just give it a few more minutes and then people can settle in and test their sound, etc. As Amelia just said, we will be taking questions at the end of the session. So please do send through your questions. Remember that, as she said, it's not legal advice that we're giving here. I'm not a legal expert in any shape or form, so nothing too legal for me or else I won't be able to answer them. So hopefully we'll cover as much as we can and give you some great answers during the webinar. As you can see, the deadline for GDPR is the 25th of May. I'm sure you know that date already, which is just over 2 weeks' time to go. So are you ready? Hopefully this webinar is going to help you, whether you've already started or you haven't even thought about it. Just give you a little bit of background. The webinar is specifically for the holiday rental homeowners and rental managers, because I felt that even though there is an awful lot of information out there about GDPR, it's a lot of theory, there's a lot of big numbers bandied about, a lot of global things, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of information that's probably not relevant to our clients here at our homeowners at Spain-Holiday.com, and we opened it up further to, opened it to the public because we felt that it's relevant and people want information that they can actually use. So today is not about like jargon, it's not about over technical, it's about practical recommendations that you can apply and get yourself ready for GDPR. So just looking at the poll results there. So the majority of people that we've got here today are actually homeowners, and then we've got about 25% rental managers. So I'm going to try and reflect that in the examples that I give you along the way, and how I explain things. Now, as I said, we've got an awful lot to get through. It's a tricky balance to find out information that you really need to know in detail and things that we can gloss over. So if you feel I'm going too fast, I apologise. The first section may go a little bit fast because I just want to get the basic lay the ground for what you need to know, and then we can take the time and go into more detail with examples for the steps that you need to take to become GDPR. So as I said, this webinar is going to cover basically, it's about three sections if you separate it. Just the basic groundwork of what GDPR is. We're going to look at some of the, I call them the myths, the a little bit scaremongering facts and figures that have been thrown about, and we're just going to dispel those now for you quickly. Then we're going to drill down to the relevant industry that we're all here to hear about today, which is the holiday and rental industry. The advice that I give would probably apply for like small businesses as well, but the examples are going to be from the holiday rental industry and probably examples for in Spain, because that's where I am and that's what I know best, even though this law is global. And so we're going to take you through those practical recommendations, and I'm hoping you're going to come out at the end of this webinar feeling that you've learned something, that you know what you can do, and that you know that you can actually achieve it and manage it. So let's see if I can do that for you. Okay. Starting off, basics. What is GDPR? GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation, and it's a new law in Europe that's replacing the previous law dated from 1995. So just to go back in time to 1995, when the law was set, there was no Google, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, there was no Hotmail, and the most advanced mobile phones could just barely send SMS messages. So clearly we were well overdue for an update to that law. Now, this law has global impact for everyone, because it's not just for businesses or holiday rentals that are based inside Europe. It is for residents within inside Europe. So even if you have a property in Thailand, if your customer is coming from Spain or from Sweden, then you need to know about these laws. It's also for customers that are actually in Europe, even if they're not European residents, and that includes whether they're visiting your website, if you have a website. If they're located inside the EU, then this law applies to you. So with, I think it's 5 billion European residents, that's an awful lot of people, and the Europeans love to travel, so wherever you are in the world, it really does apply to you. And I would say that GDPR is just generally good practice. It's good business practice for your customers, so maybe you can just apply it overall to all your clients. It's meant to make businesses more accountable for the data they hold, and for the individuals, they feel that they will have greater protection and rights. Now, excuse me, the definition of personal data, it's always been there, but maybe we didn't really remember what the 1995 regulation says about it. But those definitions have been expanded and a few new ones, so we're going to get to that. Here's one of the first key takeaways that I want you to take away. It's a positive thing. The amount of data, as I've said, that's out there on GDPR is pretty overwhelming, no matter what level of experience you have of it or knowledge. And the takeaway is that it's evolution, not revolution. Your business should already have some system in place for how you look after the data of your customers, how you use it, how you store it, and what security practices you have in place. Even if it's not a robust system that you have, maybe you're not technologically minded, that's okay. I'm sure you're not starting from zero. So building on that foundation is just going to be small steps. It's not a complete new directive that you have to take on board. Now, GDPR is important for the travel industry in particular, and the reason why is that the travel industry And even right down to the holiday rental homeowners, you have an awful lot of personal data on your customers and your prospective customers. We use it every day. And in fact, we have to have that data in order to make bookings and reservations. It's impossible to not have it. Other examples of using personal data in the travel industry would be for like marketing databases on your customer list, and also just communicating and corresponding with your customers. There is another reason, a bit of a darker reason, why GDPR is really relevant for the travel industry. And unfortunately, that is because the travel industry is the most targeted industry for cyber attacks. So security measures are important. And we'll go into this later on, and you'll see why it's important, even at the level of just a homeowner with one property or an Airbnb host with just a room to rent. It is important. Okay, just quickly, we're going to cover some things that if you've done any research at all on GDPR, you've probably come across these things. I think it's impossible to read a single article online that does not mention the fact that there are penalties of up to 20 million euros or 4% of global revenue. Well, I just want to tell you, forget about it. It's really not relevant to you at this level. No one's going to fine you 20 million euros. And even if you had a bigger international rental management company, then the regulators of GDPR actually have corrective powers. So they can issue a reprimand or corrective order. The penalties are there as a last step measure, and really they want to see that people are trying to implement these good practices of GDPR, protecting data, and then they might kind of like point you in the right direction, but they're not looking to hand out massive penalties that will cripple your business if you try your best. The second point is it's too time consuming and it's going to cost me too much. I'm just a small business. I don't have the manpower. I don't have the skills. I don't have the tools. This is going to cost me too much money. Well, I can say we're going to dispel that myth today, hopefully, fingers crossed, because you don't need any special skills, any special knowledge, any special tools at all. If you want to employ the services of a GDPR consultant or an expert, then that's your choice. But with practical advice that we give today, you're going to realize that anybody can apply these things, even the least technological minded person. If you can't quite figure out the technology that I explained today, I guarantee you your grandchildren or your children will be able to. The final point is that it's the death knell for direct marketing. You probably heard a lot of mentions about consent. We'll go into that in detail. And people are thinking that this is it, the database I've spent years or however long building up, which is where I get my repeat business, my referral business from. I can no longer use that. This is going to kill my business. That's incorrect, and I'm going to explain to you why and how you can keep using your databases. It's an opportunity to offer a personalized service, and targeted customers are surely what every business wants. Hope I'm not going too fast so far. That's basically the background. We're going to slow it down a little bit more now because we're going to go into the key areas that are relevant for the holiday rental industry. Now, you might say, if you know about GDPR already and you've done some research, that there's things that I'm not mentioning at all, and therefore this webinar is maybe incomplete. That's not true. We're looking to focus on the priorities that you need to take, what's important for you, and also there are relaxations for small businesses, so not everything is relevant, so we're trying not to bog ourselves down with all of that. We're going to talk about terminology such as the data controller and processor. And then we're going to look at personal data, what it is and how you use it, especially in the travel industry. The individual rights, what people can expect from you and what you need to do for that. The important section of all about consent, that's a really important section, so stay with me for that one. And then finally, we're going to take you through a roadmap of practical suggestions. Okay, kicking off with the data controller. Not everybody handles personal data of their individuals the same. So the law is expanding on this and giving you two definitions, two types of people that handle personal data. You have what's called the data controller, and that is defined as an entity that decides the purpose and manner that personal data is used. And the processor is defined as the person or group that processes the data on behalf of the controller. And processing is classified as obtaining, using, storing personal data, etc. Does that clarify things? Probably not, because if I tell you that sometimes as a holiday rental owner or a rental manager, you are the data processor, and sometimes you are the data controller. So I've put together a little flowchart for you, and hopefully these examples will help explain so that you understand. At the top, we have the data controller, and into the data controller here, we've put a holiday rental website. So the example I can use is Spain-Holiday.com. They receive the inquiries and the bookings, and they forward that data down to the processors. The processor could be the homeowner, or it could be the rental manager. But equally, as we said, the homeowners may have their own website. Rental managers will probably also be bringing in their own inquiries for properties and bookings as well, in which case they would become the data controller and possibly the processor at the same time. I'm sorry I can't clarify it more than that, because I'm not sure it's actually something that you want to get too stuck on the terminology at the level that we're talking for the holiday rental industry. But the information you then, as a homeowner, you may pass it down again to third parties, such as the rental manager if you have one, or maybe you'll just deal with it yourself. Then there's the legal aspect. So giving the example of here in Spain, you need to provide the police with the passport details of every guest staying in your property. And you also need to hold on to that data for a 12-month period. So that's a law that's throughout Spain, and that actually supersedes the GDPR regulations. So whatever the GDPR says, if a customer contacts you and say, delete my passport, you cannot, because that law is going to supersede it and say, I can't delete it until 12 months' time. There may be other people that you send it on to. The good thing about the holiday rental industry is that people look for a more personalised service. They want to live like a local and experience local life. So contacting with somebody local, whether it's a rental agent or the holiday rental homeowner, means that they might ask you, could you book golf for me? Could you sort out car recommendations? Who can you recommend? And you may have some actual agreements in place with different services, third-party services. So you would be forwarding some of the information to them, even if it's just a name, an email address. That all counts as personal data. So you have a responsibility as it goes down through the flow chart. From the top, we have a responsibility to make sure that we have good policies in place from the Spain-Holiday.com with our homeowners and our rental managers. Taking the next level down, the homeowners and the rental managers, you need to revisit and make sure that your policies and your agreements and contracts are good in place to show that they're going to use the data that you give them for what they're supposed to use it for, and they're going to store it and be responsible for it. Okay, personal data. Personal data is defined as any information relating to a person that enables them to be identified directly or indirectly. Now, this also includes sensitive data, such as payment information. So this is really relevant for the travel industry because we do collect, store, use and share that data. So we have to apply GDPR regulations. Even if you think, all I have is one property, how can this law apply to me? The same law that applies to Google and Facebook and the big travel brands. I'm just one person, but it does, because that data is important to people. They want to know it's safe. So I put together 3 examples there of the kind of data, personal data that we have used and store in the travel industry. So first up is the ID or passport details, which actually includes the name, address, and even though you may not use this data, you would still actually have access to it, maybe about their race, origin, biometric data. So even though you're not really interested in some of those points, you would still have it. So you have to be responsible in how you look after that and use that data. The next one is contact information, pretty self-explanatory, email addresses and telephone numbers. And then the third category that is used frequently in the travel industry is sensitive data such as financial and payment information. Individuals have always had rights, so there is a lot of talk about, they can now ask you for this data, they can ask to be removed from your mailing lists, etc., etc. And here's something, never always had these rights since 1995, but now these rights have been expanded upon and they've had new elements added to them. So again, this is not something brand new that should be a big, huge shock to anybody. They have the right to be informed, which means that individuals can ask you what data you have on them and what you've been using it for. Now, this has been in the news a lot recently. Most recently, Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg called to account for what he was doing with the data. So obviously, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg's here listening today, so it's not relevant for him. But even down at the lower level, holiday rental owners with a lot smaller data, if somebody asks you, what do you do with it, then you need to say, well, I use it for this, and I shared it with a car rental company like you asked them. And what you don't want to tell them is like, well, I sold your data to a Viagra emailing database and you're going to be spammed forevermore. So it's just good practices, good common sense. And they can ask you to be forgotten. So if they want to have their data deleted, then you have to honour that and delete them. But again, remember that there are the legal requirements that if you have to abide by legal requirements, that will supersede their requests. But the idea, the overall concept, I would say, is like we have so much data on people. Just have the minimum that you need. Just have what you need. And the rest that you don't need and you don't use, delete it. Get rid of it. And then if they want to access it and ask you to share that data with them and what you've done with it, they can do that as well. So I don't think so far there's been any major revelations. I'm hoping it's simple enough for everyone. Okay, now it gets a little bit more meaty. We're going to look at consent. Consent is classified as permission given by individuals to allow you to process personal data. So you need to know what data do you need, and we'll cover this in the roadmap. What data do you need to provide the service to the customers? And how are you going to get this consent? Now, there is a change here because before, people used to be able to opt out. So if you sent a newsletter or they signed up for something, then there would be some boxes that were already ticked, and they would have to untick those boxes to say they didn't want to have their information shared with a third party, they didn't want to receive the newsletter, etc., etc. Now those boxes must be all unticked, and they have to tick them themselves. So they have to freely give you that consent, and they can't just give you like blanket consent to send them whatever information you want. They've got to be specific. So you could be sending them, can I send you property deals, last minute deals, early bird bookings, deals, properties. Can I send you information about travel advice? Could I send you like loyalty schemes? These are kind of promotion ideas that you could use to kind of get them to sign in and agree to give you the consent. But make sure that when you do get that consent that it's clear and it's explicit and it's for what you use it for. Okay, that's just covering like the basic background, and we're going to go into the actual practical recommendations in a second. So let me just hand you back to Amelia. She's just going to run another quick poll with you and give you 30 seconds breather.
Hello. So we just want to launch another poll just to get an overview of where everyone listening is with GDPR right now. So I'm just going to launch that poll. And then we're going to move on to the action plan of becoming GDPR compliant. And there's no worries if you haven't started yet, because after today, you will be on the road. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll now. Thank you. And I'm going to hand you back over to Nicola, who will start with the action plan.
Okay, I'm back again. Just had a quick sip of water. Okay, so I can actually see that's great from the poll. We're literally on a 50-50 split of people that haven't started at all and people that have made some progress already. So, and very few of you are already compliant, just 2% compliant, and the rest is split equally. So that's interesting because those that say they haven't started, well, you have. Here's the first step. This webinar is the awareness. And after this next section, you're going to take away some actionable recommendations. So let's go. Okay. Let's slow this really down now because I want you to kind of understand it. I do apologise that we are kind of rushing through a little bit. There's a lot of information to share in this time, and it's a lot to absorb, but you do know that you will be able to watch back the recording afterwards. And the good news is that we've also put some handouts together for you. So these are going to help you in the coming sections, okay? So we've put together 6 steps that we're going to look at as a roadmap to becoming GDPR compliant. The first step we'll be looking at is auditing, then we're going to look at the privacy policies, and then we're going to look at the different ways to get permission to use the data from legitimate basis to consent. Stay with me for that bit because I've got some really important news to share with you, which should cheer everybody up. And then we're going to look at security and reporting breaches to finish up. So, data. The first step towards GDPR compliance is carrying out an audit of personal data. Now, this is actually the reason why I decided we have to do a webinar on GDPR, because that word, as soon as I read all the information about audits, and I thought, well, we're talking about people that maybe just have one property. Obviously, some of you will have more, some of you are more high tech, and some of you are rental agents, so you're kind of sitting in the middle there above that. But you know, if I just rented out a room and I saw the word audit, I would just want to bury my head back in the sand again and ignore this whole thing. So the good news is that one of the handouts is actually a nice and simple data audit mapping that you can use. And, you know, you don't need to be high tech. You can fill it out with a pen and paper if you want and store it away. So for GDPR, the data audit, you need to be mapping what types of content you collect, why you collect it, how you collect and use it, how you store it, what security measures you apply to it, how long you retain it. And once you can fully understand and have that kind of snapshot of what you do with your data processing activities, then you can work out how you need to move forward to comply with GDPR. I can't dress this up for you any other way than how it is. This is tedious, okay? Please do not fall at this first hurdle. The temptation is huge, I'm sure, but the simple template that we've done for you will help you, and it doesn't have to be overcomplicated at all. The privacy policies, again, this may not apply to everybody who's listening today, because if you don't have your own website, then you're not going to have a privacy policy on your website. That's simple. But customer privacy is at the very core of GDPR. So it's got to be at the heart of your data protection policies as well. Your private policies have got to be updated or they may already cover these things. Number one, they've got to be easy to find where it is online. They don't want to have to, search through and find it in some obscure grayed out little link at the bottom of a web page in font size 4. Just make it nice and easy. It's all about being transparent and building trust with customers. Again, let's use clear and precise language like me today, plain speaking. This is my favourite way to be. So make it so that they can understand it. We don't need legal jargon. We don't need any kind of jargon at all. Your customers will appreciate this. So it's good practice. It really is. And the transparency on the personal data. Let them know that you are taking this seriously. Let them know that you are going to document, that you're going to know how you obtain the data, that you're controlling how you use their data, and if you're retaining it, why you're retaining that data, and that they can be rest assured that it's all been stored securely. Now, onto the different ways that you are allowed to use data. There's 3 ways. The first way is contractual data, it's called, and this is absolutely 110% relevant for you as a holiday rental owner or as a rental manager or anyone in the travel industry. Why? Because to take travel bookings, if that is a contract, and then we have contractual obligation, we cannot, or you cannot fulfill that obligation to them without having the data that you require, the name, maybe it's the address, the passport, the financial details. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the things I repeat are the important bits. So you do not need to get consent from the clients, the customers, to carry out the booking, okay? Now, does that mean that once you've done the booking, could you send them an email to give them directions to where your property is? The answer is, of course, yes, you can. You don't need consent for that. That's part of the service that you provide. What about just before they arrive? Can you send them an email telling them about the local festival going on or activities, or if you know they're a family-friendly things to do, maybe vouchers for the local water park, etc.? Yes, you can. It's part of the service that you're providing. Okay, what about after they've been stay and you want to ask them for a review or feedback on the stay? Can you do that? Yes, you can. It's all part of the service. So that's all covered and you're fine. You don't need specific consent. Now, can you use their data, their personal data, so basically their email address and their name, and add them to your direct mailing list? Well, this is actually classed as a possible legitimate interest. We're going to go deeper into this because I know this is the area that is the biggest concern for everyone. Their database, do I have to ask for permission? How am I going to keep my business afloat without it? Okay, so there are legitimate, the second point is the legitimate reasons that you would have to use their data. And again, you don't need to get consent from them if you need them for legal, fiscal obligations or to protection against fraud. And the example there is, as I said before, passport details. In Spain, I couldn't tell you for other parts of the world. You are required by law to get the passport details of every adult over the age of 16 staying in your accommodation. And that information must be passed over to the police and kept on file for 12 months. So you don't need their permission, you don't need their explicit consent to do that. They have to do that. It's the law. And the third point is explicit consent. Now, regarding the consent, this is what the biggest change is that people have to, it's called opt-in consent. So they have to actually choose to give you the consent. Users only consent when they see value in what is being delivered in return. So fortunately, the travel industry in general has a definite advantage over other industries because people want to hear about holidays and offers. there's a greater incentive for them to give you their consent to their personal data being used if it helps them find out about travel plans that truly inspire them. Now, we said we were going to give you low-tech recommendations. Getting consent doesn't have to be this box ticked in your email marketing. If you're not even that technologically minded, it can actually be given verbally. Did you know that? So you can actually, when you're interacting with your customers at any given point by email, you can ask them, is it okay if I add you to this list? Is it okay if I send you maybe 4 emails a year, just kind of telling you about properties or deals that I've got going on, and I've got a loyalty scheme going, and then trying to get referrals or whatever the reason is, or we can offer you discounts, or if you refer people, give them an incentive to receive it, and they are most likely going to say yes to you. You be transparent and honest why you want it, they're going to see the value in it and say yes. Like I said, you can do this verbally as well. So when you meet the customers in person, or even your rental manager, if you don't meet them in person yourself, when they're signing other paperwork when they come to the property, ask them if they'll sign the consent form. So if they're not very high tech, you're not very high tech, you can do that. But if you are going to do it online and you're asking for consent, then you need multiple tick boxes for each type of consent you're seeking. Marketing promotions, offers, travel advice. So here's the biggest recommendation I would say to you about obtaining consent is start now. Do not wait till the 25th of May, because the more people that you can try and think, okay, well, I'm going to ask them because I'm going to offer them a loyalty scheme, or I'm going to ask them because I've got some great deals for next year, then you can try that, see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you can try a different approach to getting that consent from them. Now, so start now, and then you've got 2 weeks, and I'm sure you'll manage to get quite a bit of consent. My top advice really about consent is actually to focus on making sure that from this moment forward, you ask for consent. Regarding your database that you already have, that you're worried about, if I ask for consent and they don't give it, I have to delete them, I could potentially lose my entire database, my entire income stream of customers. So I've got another option for you, which is actually outside of GDPR. Okay, this is important. So if I have lost your attention, please come back for just 1 second. You'll want to hear about this one. This is about a way that you can continue to use personal data for marketing without having legitimate legal basis or explicit consent, which is what is requested by GDPR. Now, I said I'm not a legal expert. I wouldn't even class myself as a GDPR expert. What makes a GDPR expert an expert? Who knows? But I have spoken to the authorities. I've got helplines for you at the end of this in the useful contacts. I've spoken to lawyers in the travel industry. I've spoken to the consultants that we have here for Spain-Holiday.com to become GDPR compliant at this level. And this is some information that I've been told, and I want to share it with you. But again, I just want to say, please do, in your own personal circumstances, check this back with a lawyer. But this is actual advice from a lawyer. I'm going to read it out because I want it to go word for word so I don't get it wrong. Under the PECR, which stands for Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations. So that's a regulation that exists for electronic communications. If a customer has contacted you previously for a quote or to make a booking, it is assumed that they will be happy for you to contact them in relation to similar goods and services. This only applies to email and text marketing, and you must give the customer the option to opt out. So an example I can think of outside of the travel industry would be if you go on a website and you buy a pair of shoes, right? And then you end up receiving all those kind of like emails all the time of like shoes and sales and high heels and walking boots and everything like that. That is what this law is saying. It's saying that if you have bought a pair of shoes, we're going to assume that you are interested in footwear. Okay, so I'm not sure how far you could stretch that to say we assume that you're interested in clothes. So, but let's bring the example back to you in the holiday rental industry. If a customer has booked and come on holiday and stayed in your property, then we assume that they're interested in holidays. Can we assume that they're interested in holidays in Spain? Can we assume that they're interested in private holidays in accommodation? I'm not sure. This is not something that I would say is a rock solid guaranteed way to move forward, but I think it's got an option and I think it's worth exploring. I really do. So, but there's one thing to note, that the PECR is currently under review. So the position on this may close. I don't know if you would call it technically a loophole, but this is the advice that has been given by Farina Assam, who is partner at Travlaw, and I think that's like a great news if you've got that database. And like I said, the GDPR regulators are looking for people that are trying to apply GDPR regulations, that are taking data protection and usage seriously. So if you felt that you have a legitimate reason to use this PECR and continue as you were, I'm sure if they kind of gave you a rap on the knuckles over it, that would be it, and you would have to change your ways, but surely it's worth a go. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, the next section is about security, and actually most people, if you talk to them about GDPR, they're hung up on that consent issue, but I've just found you a workable solution to that. To me, the biggest issue is security, because the threat is real. The tourism industry accounts for the largest number of cyber attacks. That was data from 2016. And the reason why it's most vulnerable is because of the sensitive personal data and credit card information that you collect and share. Now, you might think this doesn't apply to you because you're just a small fish in a very, very big pond. But I would actually say that the smaller businesses, such as holiday rental owners and rental managers, are what I would call the low-hanging fruit on the tree. You are the easy targets for the hackers. And the reason being is that the big travel brands have got the resources. They can throw a lot of money and technology and expertise protecting themselves against cyber threats. And touch wood, it's not going to happen to any of us, but it could happen to them as well, and it has happened to them. But as the low-hanging fruit, you are the easiest targets because you may not have your security as tight as it could be. So let's have a look at some very simple, practical recommendations to tighten up those security and protect yourself. Protect your computer. I mean, I'm sure you've got your own personal data on your computers along with your customers. So let's protect everyone, yourself as well. So where do you keep your customer personal data and sensitive data? Again, it doesn't need to be high tech. If you are the kind of pen and paper person and you have a filing cabinet, that's fine. That's equally fine. Make sure it's all kept in the filing cabinet and locked away. Simple. But if you are online, and I'm sure you must be because this is the online world, then you need to look at the areas that need reviewing, and this is just good practice for security. So hardware and software, which is your laptop or your computer, even your mobile phone, you've got to make sure that you have the latest up-to-date versions of everything. You don't want to have what happened to the NHS in the UK, and they were running on Windows XP, was it? Windows 1995, I can't remember, and then they were open to security breaches. So we all have to try a little bit harder on this. Now, software, that gets a little bit more tricky because you don't really have the control over software. Software could include the email marketing software that you use. It could even include the email that you use. What else can it use? The storage. If you use cloud storage, you need to know that every single software that you use is GDPR compliant, which basically probably means that they have the data that they're storing there is encrypted. Okay, so that might mean you need to Google, is Gmail GDPR compliant? Is Dropbox GDPR compliant? Etc., etc. Or send them an email. I've sent out quite a few emails over the past few weeks asking, and the companies have all come back. Even the big companies, not one single one has ignored me, and they come back and say, yes, we're all ready for this, we're doing this, and we're doing that. But you need to think about your hardware, your phone. I can tell you, like, iPhones are encrypted. WhatsApp, if you WhatsApp clients, that's encrypted. So that's all good. But just kind of review it. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And passwords, good practice, but we're all, well, not all of us are bad at it, but good, strong security passwords, not the same password for everything, is just good practice. So that is probably the gatekeeper to keeping everything safe. So please do review that. These are just basic steps that you can do. And then the last thing is malware protection. To have virus protection on your systems is absolutely essential in today's day and age. So there are some people probably who are listening, although if you manage to get on a webinar, I'm sure you've got a bit of technological nous about it, So, but again, just ask or just Google it. These are simple steps that will take you to the road to becoming GDPR compliant. As I said, it's not overly complicated, it's not overly time consuming or expensive, and there we go. Very quickly on this section, breaches. The regulations say, this is it in a nutshell, the regulation says that if you have a data breach, if you're hacked, you have a virus, then you've got to let the relevant authorities in your country know within 72 hours, and also your affected customers know. Don't get too hung up on this point, because I don't even know how you would even know you had a data breach to be able to tell anyone. So that's the thing about data breaches and viruses. They don't kind of like announce that they're there. So don't get too hung up on that point. Okay? So those are the 6 points that I wanted to share with you. And I've just run over a little bit over time, so just quickly. Hopefully you're going to take away some actionable advice and recommendations that you can do. And don't focus on the negativity of these things. There's a lot of positive. And the most positive points that I want to point out on the compliance are, if you're transparent, your customers will appreciate that. If you've made attempts to lock down or your data encryption and you're using their data correctly, then they're going to appreciate that, and that is good for business. Trust is the cornerstone of good business practice. So all of this, to me, GDPR is just common sense, small steps that we can all take to tighten up our procedures and get better customers. And I would actually recommend that, when you email your customers, maybe on your email signature, you can find a little logo that kind of says, we are GDPR compliant. I think they will appreciate seeing that. So let's just wrap this one up there, and then we're going to be on to questions, though. The key takeaways, we've covered 6 main points, but let's drill it down even further if that's too much to start off with. Start now. Do not wait to start implementing until the 25th of May. There are small steps that you can take. You don't need to get bogged down in too much documentation and auditing. As a small business, those rules are relaxed. The bigger businesses have a lot more to do than I have explained in this webinar. Then if I could give you just 3 steps of what I've talked about that you should focus on as priority, they would be the audit. Again, remember, there's a handout that you can download, and that's a document you can use. Consent, go over those 3 different ways that you can use people's data. And the final one, security. Just tighten up those security measures and practices that you use. Your clients and the GDPR regulators will appreciate that you are trying to implement GDPR. I want to say thank you so much for listening. I hope I didn't go too fast. I hope you found it interesting and relevant. and that you feel that you can tackle this and that it's a manageable project. So good luck everybody with it, and I'm sure you have my email address from the original inquiry, and feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Okay, so that is the end of the presentation. Just going to give Nikki some time to grab some water before we move on to the questions and answers. I can see that you have some questions for us, which is fantastic. Just hope that we have brought you some clarity on GDPR, and we have run over a little bit. So we want to answer as many questions as we can now, but we will also hope to answer any additional questions, because we will release a follow-up article on Rental Buzz, and we hope to answer all of your questions on there as well. Okay, Nikki's back with me now. So one of the first questions, which I think is really relevant right now, is how will Brexit affect GDPR once the UK is out of Europe? Because this is obviously a law that affects Europe. How will Brexit affect GDPR? So, Nikki.
Thanks for that. Yes, GDPR, the UK has indicated that they will continue to apply GDPR regulations after the UK leaves the EU. So you still have to follow them. Short and simple on that one.
Next question. Is GDPR also applicable for the Guardia Civil, since it is EU law? Meaning, how does the Guardia Civil protect the data while they are using a HTTP website and not the HTTPs?
Great question. The person that asked this question, I wonder if you've been reading my articles on Rental Buzz, because I brought that up 3 years ago. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. When I mentioned that you need to share the data, the passport information with the police, I didn't mean the police or the Guardia Civil. It depends which town you're in Spain, who you have to send that information to. But you are absolutely correct that, as I pointed out in an article 2 years ago, the police own website that you have to give the data to is not a secure website, HTTPS. So I can't speak for the police, but that's something that hopefully they're going to deal with and fix, because I think that's important.
Okay, another question. Are there any circumstances where GDPR does not apply?
Okay, we covered where GDPR does apply. Just recap. So any business inside the EU, any EU residents, anybody physically located inside the EU. But where does it not apply? Well, for small or medium businesses like holiday rental owners, so the rules are somewhat relaxed, specifically related to record keeping. That's an example. So that is why in this webinar you might want to say, well, she hasn't talked about the record keeping, or she hasn't talked about data protection officers, because it's not relevant for your level. Here at Spain-Holiday.com, we have to apply these regulations, but for the smaller businesses, you do not.
My local town hall has advised my house needs a first occupation license before I can be allowed to rent, and I need to pay an architect €500 to draw up plans. Is this the case?
Okay, not quite sure that question is relevant. I'm not going to answer that question today. We don't have much time. We're here to talk about GDPR. But if you go on the Rental Buzz website, you will find that there have been previous webinars, and there are lots of articles about the licensing.
So as an owner of one holiday home, can I continue to communicate by email with renters for small questions? I noticed that they like to keep it simple and chatty.
Yes, just to recap, what I said was you have their data because you have a contractual obligation to them to make the booking, but the holiday rental industry is got the personalised touch, And that, I think, is good enough reason, a legitimate reason for you to expand and say, well, just because I've booked, it would be good for me to send them the directions to my home instead of making them search on a website or sending them some information. And yes, you correspond with clients, and that is absolutely fine. If somebody said to you, stop corresponding with me, please, then you would respect it, but do carry on, that's fine.
Okay, GDPR is not applicable for a small business. What is your definition of a small business?
Okay, I think that's been misunderstood. GDPR is absolutely 100% applicable for every business in Europe or dealing with European residents. So when I said that the rules are somewhat relaxed in certain areas, such as record keeping, and it does apply to you. So that's what this webinar is targeted at, small businesses such as holiday rental owners. It would have been a very short webinar if I had just said, it doesn't matter, go home.
So presuming all the big operators like Owners Direct, Home Away, where we advertise, and Spain Holiday have the highest level of compliance already, are they already in place for these new regulations with these big operators?
I cannot comment for what other companies are doing regarding GDPR regulations and becoming compliant. Obviously, we're 2 weeks away, so do feel free to ask any of them themselves what they're doing. I can tell you that at Spain-Holiday.com, we are moving towards GDPR compliance and taking it very seriously, right down to the fact that we're offering this advice for our homeowners.
Does it mean we don't have to keep record of the communication, such as email and WhatsApp, with the customers if we are a small house owner?
Yes, you can pop the champagne cork on that one. That is a big headache, I think, for the bigger businesses. As a small business, this is relaxed rules for the small businesses. So you do not have to document every single communication, every single usage and share of the data that you have. Just start with the audit, which will map out generally what you do and how you treat data, use it, store it, share it, etc. And then that is enough information for them.
So how long can I hold types of data for?
That's actually a really good question. I didn't touch on that at all. It says the rule is you can keep data for no longer than necessary, which is one of those kind of great, that's a very helpful answer. You need to just use it for the purpose which you collected it for. So if you only need it to make a booking, after the booking is done, if you are not using it for direct marketing and it's not covered by that, if you don't need it for legal or fiscal reasons, delete it, get rid of it, shred it and get rid of it, and don't have more data than you need. So for contractual data, just to recap, you need that data to fulfill all aspects of the contract, but that personal data, the usage may be extended for legitimate reasons as well. If you've obtained consent, an opt-in consent on the data, then it's actually up to the, I think it's the data controller who has the power to define how long you can keep it for. But I think if you inform them and say, I'm going to, as part of the privacy policy, if you opt in and say, I'm going to keep you on record for a year, then it's a year. If you want to say 2 years, then it's 2 years. At the end of the 2-year period, you're going to have to get that consent opt-in renewed. So it's not open-ended consent that you have, but the time period is open.
Okay, so how do we know if we have had a data breach or been hacked? We did touch on it earlier, but how would we know?
I have no idea. I really don't. Well, I often wonder that, and I did ask, how would you know? At the level of a person that's just, a person in one-man band or a few people in a company, then I'm not sure you would know. If you have like a dedicated IT specialist within your company, then if you do have a company, then they would probably be able to answer that. But even so, you may not know if you had a data breach, what data was taken. I find that a confusing element, so I can only be honest about that.
Okay, so what about data from several years ago? Do we need to ask consent to keep hold of that data?
Okay, you might want to go back over the webinar. This is going to be the last question. I think we're running out of time, but it's a good one. The question of consent, according to GDPR, your existing database, I find it a grey area. You need to get this opt-in consent from them now to continue using it. But if you can show already where you got the data from, so say they were existing customers, then you have a legitimate reason to say, well, they are interested in, they've shown assumed interest, so I can continue using it. If you bought a database or acquired a database of contacts by any other means that you cannot say that where you got this database from and it's legitimate, then those are the ones that you really are going to have to either stop sending emails to, or you're going to have to get that opt-in consent from them.
Okay, so that is the end of the question and answer session for today. If we didn't get round to all of your questions, like I said before, we will be releasing a follow-up article on our rental buzz. So we will hope to clarify any other questions, additional questions that you have had there. So thank you for attending the webinar on GDPR today, and we hope that we have cleared up any confusion or any concerns you had on the topic, and we hope that we've kind of waded through some of the jargon and made it a bit more clear for you.
And that's thank you from me for attending as well. Bye.